Hello and welcome or welcome back to the channel. My name is Professor G. I'm a law professor and a historian, and my area of scholarly research and focus is in the slave laws and slave codes of the antebellum South. Now, for all my viewers out there, I have to ask you a question. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Thomas Sowell can't be dumb, right? Like, it's got to be an act. Because someone sent me a video where he claims that slavery was not about racism, and I mean, the man did an undergrad at Harvard. I think he did his PhD at the University of Chicago. Pretty sure he's still alive, but he's in his mid-90s, so if he did pass away, I apologize. But someone sent me this video in response to one of my videos claiming, that Robert E. Lee was a monster, and of course exposing all the horrors of the antebellum slaveocracy. And they sent me this real quick YouTube short on how Thomas Sowell said that slavery was not about race. And because I'm new to YouTube and I don't really have all the technology, I don't even know how to plug it into my own video, so I'll put the link in the description, go watch it at 60 seconds. But again, I ask, he's got to be acting, right? Because if you notice what this was, and it's a clip from an interview, I can tell you exactly what's happening without even having to go watch the whole thing. The interviewer is, of course, talking about the American system of slavery, which was, without question, 100% based entirely on white supremacy and racism towards people of African descent. There is no questioning that. I've proven it multiple times, and I'm going to prove it again today. So much so that white people, according to the laws in all of the antebellum slaveholding states, could not be slaves, not simply because of the law alone, but because it was unnatural for white people to enslave other white people, whereas it was natural for white people to enslave Africans. And again, I don't want to rehash in every single video the stuff I've already said, so for those of you who are returners, I apologize, but for new viewers, the real quick overview of the American system of African slavery deals with this, that the jurists in the antebellum South, in the slaveocracy, wanted to establish that slavery did not require positive law for it to exist, meaning you did not have to have on the rule books in law, slavery is allowed. They believed you didn't need that because slavery was the natural condition for people from Africa, for people of African descent. And it was only the natural condition because, and again, I'm going to go to an inquiry into the laws of Negro slavery here by Thomas R. Cobb. And again, for new viewers, if you don't know who this is, he was known as the James Madison of the Confederacy, because James Madison was the father of the Constitution. Thomas Cobb was known as the father of the Confederate Constitution, which enshrined forever their hopes, the institution of African slavery into the law. But he wrote this book, he wrote this treatise, and compiled as many cases as he could find dealing with all aspects of slavery in the antebellum South, so that if you were an attorney practicing law in one of the slaveholding states and you had a slavery issue, you would bring this with you to court and you would use it to help create an argument. This book was so important and so popular in antebellum slaveholding states in the courts that many state Supreme Courts even directly cited to this. And you can find it in court opinions in Alabama, in Mississippi, and so on. So this is not just some book that someone picks up off the shelf. This was used by attorneys and judges to decide and create arguments concerning the enslaved in the antebellum South. So one of the things that Thomas Cobb tries to do is he says that something does not go against the laws of nature if it betters the condition of a person, and that there is no such thing as a universal right that applies to all people. Rights have to be looked at in terms of whether or not it benefits a person or if it hurts that person. If it benefits them, it is a natural right. If it hurts them, it is not something they are entitled to, and in fact they shouldn't have, because the natural order of things is for man to better their fellow man. And watch how twisted this is going to get. So I'm going to read from the book. He says, "We adopt as the law of nature, when applied to man in his intercourse with his fellow man, that obligation which reason and conscience impose so as to shape his course as to attain the greatest happiness and arrive at the greatest perfection of which his nature is susceptible. Consequently, whatever interferes with the attainment of this happiness and perfection does violence to the law of his nature, and whatever promotes or is consistent therewith is sanctioned by the law of nature." So if it's good for him, it follows the law of nature. If it's bad for him, it doesn't. In this view, natural rights depend entirely upon the nature of the possessor, not of the right, for it is the former and not the latter that determines the question of right. Hence, to speak of natural right to personal liberty is unphilosophical until the previous question is settled that such liberty will conduce to the happiness and the perfection of the possessor. So it's only a natural right you as a human are entitled to if it betters you. If it goes again, if it does bad to you, if it doesn't lift you up, if it doesn't create a better environment for you, then it goes against the law of nature for you to have said right. Now, the next paragraph completely destroys good old Thomas's argument that race was not about slavery. That slavery was not about race. It's been a long day. It's South Louisiana. It's very hot. I even unbuttoned my collar. But someone sent me this, and I needed to get on the camera and get this out tonight. So forgive me, but let's keep going. It says, in this view, is Negro slavery consistent with the law of nature? We confine the inquiry to Negro slavery because, upon the principles already established, it is undoubtedly true that the enslavement by one man or one race of another man or another race, physically, intellectually, and morally their equals, is contrary to the law of nature because it promotes not their happiness and tends not to their perfection. So a white person cannot enslave another white person because there is nothing that enslaved white person can get from me because we are of the same physical, intellectual, moral, we have all of those same attributes, so there is nothing that being enslaved to me, another white person, can do to benefit you. He then goes on to explain how people of African descent are not only physically built for labor, therefore they were naturally created to be enslaved, but they are mentally inferior and they actually prosper when enslaved, and when they are freed, it does violence to their nature. They don't survive when they're free. Look at Africa. In Africa, no Negro has ever created a civilization or a religion or a language or math or science or culture or theology. That's all in this book, and I've discussed it in many previous videos. So white people can't enslave white people because that goes against the law of nature, because there is nothing that one white person can be elevated by another white person in the state of slavery. However, because, as I said, Thomas Cobb goes on to say, in a book, in a treatise cited by many antebellum courts, that he goes on to say that people of African descent are mentally inferior, are naturally built for slavery, and that the system of slavery is actually good for them. Therefore, taking away their liberty benefits their nature, whereas giving them liberty does violence to their nature. So, Thomas, how is this not about race? How is the American system of slavery not about race? Now, what Thomas did in this clip is he tap danced around it. I don't understand for what reason, because he is correct. In previous civilizations, going back to, and slavery has been around since humans have been humaning, right? It has not always been about race. But the American system of slavery 100% absolutely was. And that's why, in my opinion, yes, you cannot have a tier level of slavery. They are all horrific and they are all horrible. Shame I have to say that, because people will take what I'm about to say out of context. But I personally believe the American system of slavery was so bad, if not one of the worst forms of slavery in the history of humanity, and I believe it was that bad because it was based on race. Because unlike a society that enslaved someone because, as Thomas said, they were in the same geographical region, I didn't look at that person as inferior. I either beat them in combat, in battle, and I could have killed them on the field, so now they're my slaves, I have the right to their life, or they owed me a debt, so now they're my slaves. But if I freed that person, I didn't have this deep down ingrained thought that they are inferior to me. And in fact, that slavery is the best place for them. In fact, many people probably looked at enslaved people, and you can see this as you go through the history of slavery, other than slavery in the United States. You know, look at this poor sucker. Like, sucks to be him, right? You lost in battle, now you're my slave. That's terrible. Whereas many in the antebellum South looked at slavery and said, oh, this is good for them. because, in Africa, they're heathens. It's barbarism over there. It's tribalism. They just kill each other and eat babies and worship, idols, and it's terrible, and they can't even come up with culture and language and art and religion. So slavery in America was looked at as being a good thing. So, yes, he's correct that slavery in the past was not based on race, not all of it based on race, but American slavery clearly was, and that racial idea, what was ingrained in these people's heads in the antebellum South, the reason I think it was so much worse than other forms of slavery is that white supremacy didn't end when the 13th Amendment was passed. And you see that through the failed Reconstruction era, all the way through Jim Crow era, all the way to the Civil Rights era, and then today where systemic racism still plagues us, especially in the legal system. And it's because all of these jurists, now, not Thomas Cobb, hilariously, he was killed at the Battle of Fredericksburg, so he didn't live through the Civil War, but many of the people who cited from this treatise and used these laws, and these judges in these courts were still there after 1865. And while slavery may have ended, the racial idea, the white supremacy, did not. So again, correct me if I'm wrong, I just made a video about Graham Hancock not being a racist. I don't think, Thomas Sowell here is a racist. Of course not. He's African American. But he can't be that dumb. And he knows what he was saying in this clip. And I'm looking at this clip alone because this was what was sent to me, so this is what I'm refuting in this video. So again, was slavery in the antebellum South in the United States based on race? 100%. The preeminent legal scholar of slavery during the antebellum period, one of the most famous jurists in the state of Georgia, and the James Madison of the Confederacy said, whites cannot enslave other whites because it goes against the laws of nature. Whereas whites can enslave Africans because they are mentally inferior. They need whites to teach them and culture them and raise their living to do benefit to their nature, to do good to their nature. And of course, they were physically created to be enslaved and to do manual labor. So, Thomas, I mean, I know you're not dumb, but help. I mean, someone tell me something. But as always, thank you for watching the video. Remember, like, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one.